Well, hello everyone and welcome. All right, guys, bear with me. I'm doing the usual here, trying to go live on Instagram. Okay, I think it's working behind the scenes, and we are live. We're live in all the places. All right, guys, happy Thursday. Really excited about today's topic because it is, let's be honest, insomnia. Who hasn't had insomnia? And many of our clients and patients have chronic insomnia. So, we are going to really tackle this topic because it really affects so many people, just about everyone, either personally or through the patients and clients that we serve. So, I'm really excited to be joined by Dr. Nishi Bhopal. And Dr. Bhopal has an amazing background. She's board certified in psychiatry, sleep medicine, and integrative holistic medicine. And she is the founder of IntraBalance, where she helps both individuals and healthcare practitioners better understand and address sleep challenges. And her mission is to make sleep science practical, accessible, and much less overwhelming. So I want to thank you, Dr. Bhopal, Nishi, for joining us today. And let's jump right in to something that might surprise people in that we constantly hear that sleep is one of the pillars of good health. Obviously, as health practitioners and coaches, we know this, but you've said that for some people, that messaging in of itself can sometimes make insomnia worse. How does that happen? Tell us your thoughts around that.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be on your platform to talk about this. So I think a lot of us have heard this message, especially in the last few years, that sleep is the foundation of health, that if you don't sleep well, it's going to impact so many different aspects of your cardiovascular health, your cognitive functioning, your mental health, and so on. And that is true to a certain extent. But I think what has happened is a lot of people are now becoming neurotic and anxious around their sleep. So it's creating a lot more anxiety than it needs to. And a lot of this messaging that's out there about the importance of sleep is aimed at the person who is not prioritizing their sleep. So it's aimed at the person who's burning the candle at both ends, who's maybe putting sleep on the back burner. They're staying up late to do whatever, they're working or taking care of their kids, and they just want that me time, at the end of the day. So they're deprioritizing their sleep. So a lot of that messaging is focused on those folks. But what's happening is the people who have chronic insomnia, so your patients and clients with chronic insomnia who are already like hyper vigilant about their sleep, they're hearing this messaging and it's making them more anxious about it. And so I hear from my patients that, they're worried they're going to get dementia because they're not getting enough sleep, or they're going to, have heart disease or have a stroke or something like that down the line. They're worried about the metabolic consequences of it. And there is some truth to that. So I'm not saying that sleep is not important. Obviously, I'm a sleep doctor. It's very important. But I think how we talk about it is just as important. And we can talk about like the messaging and how to do that so that you're not inadvertently making your clients worse, because the patients with insomnia, they're putting a lot of effort into improving their sleep. And the thing with sleep is that the more effort you put into it, the worse it gets.
Yep. And isn't that interesting, right? Like usually with life, if you try a little harder, it ends up serving you better. Not always, obviously. But in this case, it can actually backfire. So well, first of all, can you talk a little bit about how we can kind of reframe that with our patients and clients in order to improve those outcomes versus potentially risking a worse outcome?
So I think the first thing is to understand what normal sleep looks like. And for a lot of our patients and clients, they've heard that the average adult needs 7 to 9 hours of sleep to be healthy, right? And that can be a little bit misleading, actually. So when the National Sleep Foundation put together these recommendations of 7 to 9 hours, they're talking about sleep opportunity. So they're not saying that you need to be asleep for that full 7 to 9 hours, but that's how much time you should allow yourself in bed, depending on your innate sleep set point. And we all have an innate sleep set point. Like, just like you have your own shoe size and I have my own shoe size,
Yeah.
like you have your sleep set point and I have mine, and that might be different. And for the average, like 50-year-old, the healthy sleep set point is around 6.7 hours. It's not even that 8-hour mark. And so a lot of our patients have this idea that they have to get 8 hours of sleep every night to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that sleep changes with age. Our sleep requirements go down. And for most adults, like around 6 or 7 hours of sleep is perfectly healthy. So I think that's like a good place to start, because I see a lot of those folks who like, they get so anxious that they're not getting their 8 hours that they've heard about.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that is really important for us as the clinician to share with our patients and clients is that sleep naturally fluctuates from night to night. So some nights you might be getting 5 or 6 hours, and other nights you might be getting 9 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And like a couple of hours of fluctuation, like even up to 2 hours of fluctuation from night to night, is within the range of normal. I see patients who get really anxious that, well, I got 8 hours the other night, and then last night I only got 6 hours. Like, something's wrong with my sleep. It's like, no, that's normal. That's a normal fluctuation. And if we use the analogy that it's almost like hunger, like if you had a day where you were out hiking and, you had a really strenuous, like long day out, you're going to be hungrier that day. So you're going to consume more calories naturally. The same thing happens with sleep. You're going to be more sleepy and tired. And then other days where maybe you're more sedentary and you're just not as active, you just might not feel as hungry. And the same thing happens with sleep. You just might not be as hungry for sleep at night. So if we allow that little bit of flexibility, it can take away some of the anxiety and neuroses that we see around sleep. And the third thing I'll just mention on this point is that many of our patients are using wearables and trackers.
Yes.
Right? So they might be using an Oura. You got your Oura ring. Yep. Mine died, so I'm waiting. I'm just actually taking a break from mine, and then I'll get a new one. But many of our patients are using those. And I think there's two things that are really important to recognize with these wearables.
Okay.
The first thing is that sleep staging, we take that with a grain of salt, because sleep like stage 1, 2, 3, and REM sleep, which is stage 3, these are measured by EEG brainwaves. And so we can't really get an accurate read of those from a wearable that's on your finger or on your wrist. Okay. So I don't even look at the staging.
By the way, because I have to confess, like I look at it every day, like, oh my God, how much deep sleep did I get? So what you're saying is the accuracy is questionable at best. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
It's not even useful data, to be honest with you.
Really?
And the World Sleep Society came out with recommendations on what metrics are actually useful from these consumer grade wearables.
Okay.
And the metrics that are useful are the time that you went to sleep, the time that you woke up, like how long you slept, and your sleep efficiency. And the metrics that are not useful, so they categorize the not useful ones, are the sleep staging data. The other metric that is not useful from these wearables is your resilience score or your sleep score, because those are proprietary algorithms. We don't even know what they're basing that score on.
Okay.
And the other thing is that a lot of times, if you get a sleep score that was excellent, that is because you probably had an episode of rebound sleep. And rebound sleep is that sleep I was talking about, like if you had a strenuous day of exercise, you were out and about and stuff, or maybe you were sick or something, and your body's like giving you that rebound sleep, and maybe you slept for 8 or 9 hours and you woke up and you're like, I feel great, and my resilience score or my sleep score is great. It's because you had rebound sleep, and it's not something we can achieve every single night. And so sometimes I see patients chasing that excellent sleep score when it's physiologically impossible to get that every single night. So these are just some of the important foundations for clinicians to understand when you're talking to patients about sleep.
Can you tell me the sleep staging? What are they basing it on? Like the amount or the number of minutes, or in some cases, hours of deep sleep? Do you know what variable they're basing that on?
This is all proprietary information that we don't know. We don't actually know what they're using. So when we talk about sleep stages, in sleep medicine, there's stage 1, 2, 3, REM. Stage 1 is our transitional stage from wake to sleep. Stage 2 is still considered light sleep, but a little bit deeper. So about 5% in a healthy adult, about 5% of our sleep is stage 1. About 50% of our sleep is stage 2. About 20% of our sleep architecture as an adult is as stage 3 deep sleep, and then about 25% is REM sleep. I'm talking about like your average healthy adult. That is all based on EEG brainwaves. So we measure that in the sleep lab with the EEG. With the consumer grade wearables, we don't know how they're measuring it. So when I'm working with a patient or a client and they come to me, they're like, I only got 12% REM sleep and I'm supposed to be getting 25%. I'm like, well, this data is not really that meaningful to me because I don't know how they're measuring that. They're not measuring it with an EEG. So let's just throw that out and let's look at what's actually useful, which is some of the other metrics that I mentioned, like how long you're sleeping, your regularity of sleep. And sometimes I like to look at the HRV, the heart rate variability.
Oh, right.
I like to look at that. Where the sleep staging could be a little bit helpful is just trends over time. So if we see over time that as you develop healthier sleep habits, maybe your deep sleep score goes up. Okay, so maybe something's improving there, but I'm not looking at the absolute.
We don't know what it is.
We don't know what it is. So I don't, if it's 10%, if it's 50%, not really meaningful to me.
Okay. That's so interesting to me because, I am one of those people. I look at it first thing in the morning. What was my sleep score? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So a new metric or relatively new metric on specifically the Oura Ring is the sleep debt. I wondered how you felt about that. I can guess, but just curious if that is useful in your opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I don't know. So like I said, I don't have my Oura Ring, so I haven't used it for a few months. So I don't know the new, what all they're measuring. I'll have to get my new one and look at it.
Yeah.
So So my short answer is I don't know. I'd have to look into it and see exactly what they're looking at. But I'm curious, what does it say about the sleep debt?
Yeah.
What are you noticing?
Yeah. So I have a sleep debt of. Because I'm a pretty good, and I got a sleep score of 93, just saying. But I do have mine is telling me that I have a sleep debt of an hour and 10 minutes. And I think it's just based, and I'd be curious to know from our audience, anyone that uses these wearables, what's been your experience? I'd love to get a little more feedback on what your thoughts are. But this is a relatively new update on the Oura Ring. I assume they just kind of decide how much, maybe your average sleep or your ideal amount of sleep based on your averages. And, if you dip below that, it'll add it up. So
it's really interesting.
I know, right?
Yeah. I'd be curious to take a look at that. But, what I will say is that we need to be careful about not falling into the trap of orthosomnia. And orthosomnia is when people get really fixated on getting perfect sleep. And there is no such thing. It's kind of like orthorexia, if anyone's familiar with that term.
I think everyone here is probably.
Yeah. So it's the same idea, except it's a fixation on that perfect sleep. And what happens, and what I've seen with my clients and patients, is now they start to trust the wearable data more than they trust themselves. And ultimately, what's most important is how you feel.
Yes.
And it's really funny because my husband falls into this trap sometimes. I'll ask him oh, how'd you sleep last night? And he'll be like, let me check my Oura Ring. I'm like, no. How do you feel? Right? I don't care what your Oura Ring data says. How do you feel? And so a lot of the work that we're doing around coaching, so if you're coaching your clients, can you coach them to connect back with how they feel, with their intuition, listening to their body? And sometimes that means we do take a break from the tracker for a while. So I'm all for trackers. I'm not opposed to them. I think they're very useful, and they're very useful for implementing behavioral change. And I can come back and talk about what I mean by that. But if you do see the client who's now if you ask them, how'd you sleep? And they're like, let me check my app first. No. How do you feel?
Yeah.
If you're seeing that, let's take a break from the tracking.
Yeah. So maybe the question, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel versus, maybe we need to rephrase that. But go ahead. I don't want you to lose your train of thought.
Oh, sure. No, I was just going to just tie a bow on that by saying that if you're seeing a patient who has chronic insomnia, so not just the person who's using it out of interest and like, it's helping them with lifestyle change, but they're really obsessive about it, or they're really anxious about it, or they can't sleep, you definitely want to take a break from the tracking. And because it's not helping them, it's just feeding into their anxiety.
Yeah, that is such a great point. Yeah, like I can say for myself, sometimes I get not a great sleep score, but I feel fine, you know? And then honestly, other times I'm like, God, I'm just dragging today, despite getting, a 93, right?
Yep.
So it really, at least in my personal experience, it just varies a lot, and you really can't just hang your hat on what the data on these wearables is showing you. So, but really interesting thing that you're seeing with this heightened anxiety around trying to achieve that perfect, sleep score.
Yeah.
Also, super interesting what you said about really not necessarily needing 8 hours, right? So, and something that I was kind of surprised to see is because I always thought, oh my gosh, I for sure get 8.5 hours every single night. But actually, when you add it up, not so much, right? Because you do spend time going to sleep, you wake up, it just isn't, it's just kind of interesting how, like, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, for sure, I get 8.5 hours like every single night, but not so much. It doesn't account for all the awakenings and, just normal.
Normal. It's normal. It's normal to have awakenings. That's another really important thing to convey to clients. And those awakenings they're a normal part of our sleep architecture. Okay. And if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, it's a safety mechanism that we would wake up in the middle of the night, make sure our surroundings are safe, there's no intruders, no predators, and go back to sleep. Make sure the babies are breathing, all of those things. It's a safety mechanism. And this idea that we should be out cold for 8 hours, it's actually a very modern idea. So this idea came about in the I think it was like the late 1800s or like early 1900s, where it was a Welsh social reformer, and he was advocating for workers' rights in factories. Because back then, think about like, in the olden days, people would work in factories for like, 18 hours at a time. Yeah. So he advocated in the UK for 8 hours work, 8 hours personal time, and 8 hours sleep. And so this idea of 8 hours sleep came from that industrial revolution, sort of social reform.
Okay.
And we don't need 8 hours of sleep necessarily. Some people do. So like there's a lot of it, like I said, shoe size, right? Like everyone's different. But the absolute duration of sleep is less important actually than the consistency of your sleep timing. And this was brought forth by a study that was done a couple of years ago. It was like a huge study in the UK of like, I forget the exact number, like, 60, 70,000 people or more. And they were looking at the question of, is it more important to get a certain amount of sleep or the regularity of sleep, which has a bigger impact on health? And they found that the regularity of sleep, so having a consistent wake up time, had a more positive impact on health than getting a certain amount of sleep, but at different times.
Interesting.
Another thing I emphasize with my patients and clients is like, let's not focus as much on how many hours, because that's going to fluctuate, just like you're going to be, some hungrier on more days and less hungry on other days, right?
Sure.
That's going to fluctuate. But if you can maintain a consistent wake up time within about an hour of the same time every day across weekdays and weekends, that's actually going to have a better impact on your health, your energy, your sleep quality even is going to improve. And that's something we can control. We can't control how many hours of sleep you get, but we can control your sleep habits. And that's one of the most impactful habits a person can focus on.
So can you comment on why trying harder? I can make some assumptions here, but from your perspective, why does trying harder to sleep make things worse?
So you kind of mentioned this. Yeah. And you mentioned this at the beginning, right? So for a lot of people, the harder we work at something, the better it gets.
Yeah.
So, you study harder, you get a better exam score. You work harder in your job and you're more likely to get the promotion. Or, if you have your own business, the more you work on marketing and sales, the more your business grows, right?
Exactly.
So a lot of us who are high achievers, we have that experience. This is why you might see a lot of high achievers in your practice who really struggle with insomnia, because sleep is the opposite. The more effort you put into it, the worse it gets. And the reason for that is because sleep is a passive process. The more we think about it, the more our nervous system gets activated. And that activated nervous system is the opposite of sleep. We need to downshift the nervous system. We need to calm things down, and then sleep flows in. It's like waves coming in, right? We need to allow that wave to come in. But the more we're revved up, we're in that sympathetic nervous system activation, the more we're pushing sleep away. And there's this quote that I love by Gillian Flynn. She wrote the book Gone Girl. And the quote is, "Sleep is like a cat. It only comes to you when you ignore it." And right. And what we see, and what we see with people who are trying harder, that sleep effort now makes sleep into a performance. And so you think about performance anxiety, right? Like if someone has performance anxiety, they get up on stage and they freeze. Sleep now becomes a performance, and that activates the nervous system, and they're in the fight or flight state. And sleep is incompatible with that, because sleep only happens when your nervous system feels safe. So the harder a person tries, the more supplements now they're going through melatonin, magnesium, L-theanine, ashwagandha. Let me try all the things.
Yes.
Or they might be doing sleeping pills. Let me try trazodone, gabapentin, Clonidine, all these things. They're in this cycle of sleep effort. They're trying harder. Let me try this meditation. Okay, I'm going to listen to my meditation app. That's not working. You can see how that's going to be antithetical to the person who sleeps well, they don't even think about it. They just fall asleep, right? What did you do? Nothing. I don't know. I don't think about it. So when you're working with that client who's in that sleep effort cycle, we have to be really mindful as the practitioner that we're not feeding into that cycle by saying, "Hey, why don't you try this cortisol manager? Maybe that'll help you," right? We're feeding into that effort. Why don't you try this meditation? That might help you. We're trying to help them, but unwittingly we're feeding into that dance, what I call the dance of sleep effort. So the more we can help them shift away from trying to experience sedation, we're trying to force sedation, right? That's ultimately what people are trying to do. Let's shift away from that and let's focus on sleep habits. We can't control your sleep, but we can work on habits that promote sleep, that will allow that wave to come in or allow that cat to come back to us. And if we can shift our focus to the daytime habits, then we're creating the conditions for sleep to happen. And that's the only thing that we can actually control.
I love that. It does remind me of a philosophy for healthy weight management, and that would be stop focusing on the number on the scale and, instead focus on, those healthy habits, eating balanced meals, right? Like those types of things. And then a lot of times, lo and behold, people achieve whatever their end goal is just by focusing on let me rephrase that, removing the focus from that number on the scale.
Exactly. That's a perfect analogy, because the person with insomnia is focused on the duration of sleep. I need to get that 8 hours, just like the number on the scale. And this is why, like we have a client facing coaching program for sleep. It's called Effortless Sleep. And that's the whole point, is removing the effort around it and getting out of our own way, like helping the client get out of their own way so that sleep can come back in. And it's really about reducing the effort. And it's such a paradoxical thing for people to understand, especially the high achiever, because they want to control everything. But this is one of those areas where we need to learn how to let go.
Interesting. So if someone is struggling with sleep, what would you say are some really helpful or key habits or behavioral changes that they can focus on that are actually within their realm of control?
So what I always tell clients is that good sleep starts during the day.
Mhm.
A lot of times people focus on just what happens in that hour before they go to bed or right at bedtime. The good sleep starts the first thing in the morning when you first wake up. So having that consistent wake time, going outside, getting some bright light exposure for at least 10-15 minutes without sunglasses, that will help reset the circadian rhythm. If you don't have bright light or you can't go outside, you can use a light therapy device like a light box or a wearable light therapy device. That's one of the most impactful things. The next thing I recommend that a lot of people don't think about or even realize is impactful is consistent meal times. So light exposure and then the timing of your meals, those really regulate the circadian rhythm. And having a consistent meal time every day, especially using lunchtime as your anchor, is going to send that signal to your body clock. And for anyone who has a pet, that they know exactly when it's dinner time, right? Like my dog, we used to feed him at 6 p.m., like 5:59. He's like, all right, I'm ready. Like he knew, he had that internal clock. And as humans, we have that internal clock too. It's just we've lost touch with it. So if we can regulate that clock, that will help. And then the third thing is to have some kind of a wind down routine. I use the analogy of like parking the car in the garage. Like a lot of our patients and clients, they're on the go all day long, and then they want to come to a complete stop and just get into bed and fall asleep. And it doesn't work like that. It's like you're driving, 90 miles an hour on the highway. You don't just come to a complete stop and park in the garage. You got to exit, you got to slow down, pull into the garage, then you come to a complete stop, right? So the nervous system is like that too. So we have to allow that process of winding down. So focusing on those habits is going to allow sleep to come in. We're just creating the conditions, and then let go of the expectation that I need to get this many hours every single night.
I'm going to guess that the dietitians and naturopaths here watching today are loving the regular meal concept. I mean, and of course the other ones, but I got to be honest, that one's new to me. That one is really brand new. I've not heard that. And as a dietitian, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's one of those things that a lot of people don't know about, but it's really impactful. And I had a patient who came to me, and she had been struggling with insomnia for decades, like since she was a teenager, and she was now in her late 30s, so 20 plus years. And she had tried all the things, all the medications and so on. Nothing was really helping her. And so when we dug into what was going on, I like to look at all of I want to know what your day looks like. What time do you get up? When do you eat? Like all the things.
Okay.
And it turned out she was, she had this really irregular meal schedule because her work schedule was really busy. So she was skipping meals, then, grazing, it was just not regulated. So I said, okay, let's just start with one thing. And I want you to have lunch around the same time every single day. And I want you to put your devices away and just sit and eat mindfully.
Wow.
And that's going to do two things. It's going to regulate your circadian rhythm, but it's also training your nervous system to calm down, getting you to that rest and digest mode. That's why we call it rest and digest, because we have to do both. So we're training her nervous system to calm down with that practice. And she came back to me 2 weeks later, and it's not like her problems were all solved. We were still working on, but she was like, my sleep is already so much better. Like I'm already starting to feel sleepy on a schedule without my, medication. Yes.
I had no idea. I'd love to, because I see we've got some RDs, especially over on Instagram. Have you ever heard this? And I have to say, just lunch is my worst meal, just saying. So yeah, just in terms of, I just don't make it a priority. So yeah, maybe that's a good takeaway for someone like myself to work on. I'm also really curious about the sunlight, because I think many of us have heard that. But I think maybe the caveat, and I'm sure I've heard this too, the morning sunlight is the key, right? So not necessarily 1 p.m. sunlight, but early morning, I think is what I'm hearing you say.
So yes and no. So yes, definitely the morning sunlight, because what the morning light does is it suppresses the brain's production of melatonin, because our brain makes melatonin at night, and then that peaks during the night, and then it goes down in the morning, and then we want to elevate that cortisol awakening response in the morning, and that's what helps us feel awake and alert. So getting sunlight puts an anchor on the circadian rhythm. It suppresses that melatonin production. It helps with that cortisol awakening response, and it resets the body clock. But the midday light is also very important. That 1 p.m. light that you're talking about is very important too, because most of us have a deficiency of light exposure during the day and a deficiency of darkness at night. Because if you're working indoors, like I'm in a brightly lit room right now, I'm indoors, but even then it's probably like 800 to 1,000 lux UX of light intensity. Outside right now, I'm in California, we got bright blue skies right now. It's probably about 100,000 lux of light intensity.
Huge difference.
Indoor light, even though it feels bright, it's not as bright as we think it is. And we need that daytime bright light exposure to keep us awake and alert, and then the darkness at night. So I do encourage people to go outside, get that morning sunlight. But again, at lunchtime, I love to use that midday anchor. Maybe after your lunch, go outside and go for a 5-minute walk. And get that bright light exposure. Or if you have a deck or something where you can go out, just go sit out there for a few minutes and get that bright light. And the more you can emphasize that, the more it's going to regulate the circadian rhythm and create the conditions for sleep to happen.
And I just wanted to follow up with a question about the portable light things, whatever, I don't know what they're called. Can you comment a little bit more on that in terms of efficacy and maybe what we're looking for?
Yeah, I wish I had one with, I think it's in my other room charging. I should have brought it with me so I could show you what it looks like. I have 2 different ones. And they're basically like, remember Star Trek? Remember Data? He used to wear those. So it's like a very Star Trek looking thing. It kind of like sits, it's like a, it just sits over your glasses if you wear glasses. And then there's one version where the light comes down, and I have another one where it sits here and then the light goes up. Those are very effective. One's called AYO, AYO, if anyone's interested in looking them up. The other one is called Retimer. And these are evidence-based, and they're useful for like circadian rhythm regulation, helping increase energy during the day. They can also be useful for seasonal affective disorder, for patients who have that winter depression type of thing. And we actually have a client in our effortless sleep program who is struggling with the morning light, the circadian regulation, and she got the Retimer visor glasses, whatever you want to call them, device. And she was like, she's like, oh my God, it's so much easier to get up in the morning. I have more energy. I can like focus on getting my sleep in track. So yes, very useful. Maybe next time if we do this again, I'll bring them with me and I can show you.
Sure. Okay, and you'll bring yours. I'm curious. Does anyone have any comments? Has anyone tried those? And what are they called? Like light boxes?
So the light box is the device that looks like the happy light is kind of what some people call them.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a light box. It's usually like an iPad sized. They come in different shapes and sizes. Okay. That's a device that you just put in front of you and you sit in front of it and it bathes your face in light. These are called wearable. Okay. If you Google like wearable light therapy device.
Cool.
There's 3 main brands: AO, Retimer, and the third one is called Luminette.
Okay.
So if you Google
and all 3, would you say all 3 are efficacious?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Well, that is a great tip. I do want to just briefly share. We got a couple comments here. Oh, okay. So somewhat, Kristen. Hey, Kristen has a whoop. Well, I think that's a bracelet, and the Aura. Completely disagree on sleep staging. Oh my gosh. Okay, about the algorithms, those secret algorithms, kind of like social media, right? Like who can figure out the algorithm? What are they actually looking at? Okay, so, and she goes on to say in 2023, her deep sleep got cut by 2/3. Okay, yeah, trends. That's actually a really, really good tip. And I think you had mentioned that before too, Nishi, is to look at the trends.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to sleep staging, but we don't even know. I don't even know if I would feel comfortable, like based on what you're saying, because we don't even know what it's based on, right?
Exactly.
Based on like those sleep staging trends, I don't even know how useful that really turns out to be.
And I like to look at trends over the course of like 2 weeks.
Okay.
The single night information is not as helpful as like what's happening over the course of a couple of weeks. And what I like to look at, especially with Oura Ring, I know there's lots of different devices. That's just the one I'm most familiar with because I've used it and I have clients who use it, is the HRV, so the heart rate variability.
Yes.
And how I like to use that in sessions is as a behavioral modification tool, like as a coaching tool. Because, and if anyone relates to this scenario, please tell us in the comments, that you have the patient who's like, oh, I can drink 2 glasses of wine and it doesn't affect my sleep. Or I can have coffee at 8 p.m. and it doesn't affect my sleep. So, okay, well, let's test that, right? And so then, I had a patient a few months ago who she was having a couple glasses of wine at night. She's like, I don't think this really hurts my sleep. And then saw in her Oura Ring data that her heart rate variability tanked when she was drinking alcohol, and it was way better when she was not drinking alcohol. And me telling her was not as impactful as her seeing those numbers and her just seeing the difference of what her curvy looks like with and without was motivating enough for her to make that behavioral change. So that's how I like to use this. So let's not worry about as much about your sleep score, but let's look at how different behaviors might be impacting you.
And can you comment for those of us who may need a little refresher on what exactly are they measuring with HRV? I'm thinking some of our people listening today might benefit from a little explanation.
Yeah, absolutely. So heart rate variability is really measuring these like little microscopic changes between heartbeats. When you look at EKG, you've got your rhythm, and we want to see like how much variability is there between those heartbeats. And higher the HRV, the better. And that's because when your body allows for more variability and flexibility, it means it's more adaptable. So you're more adaptable to stress. So if you have a higher HRV, it means your body's better able to regulate and change that little, microscopic rhythm between each of your heartbeats. When the HRV is low, it means that it's more of a fixed rhythm and your body's not as adaptable to stress. So you can think of HRV as like a resilience marker. So the higher it is, the more resilient you are to stress, your body's better able to recover. The lower it is, it reduces your resilience. So that's number one. So if we're looking at the trends, so not the absolute number again. So it's not like there's a good HRV or a bad one. It's very individual. So don't compare it. So if you have clients who compare, like I'll just use my personal life as an example again. Like my husband loves to he's not in healthcare, so it's like we have to teach people these things. So he loves, what's your HRV? What's my HRV? Like, no, we can't compare them. Like they're different. Like I have my own set point. You have your own set point. So, so if your client asks you like, what's the best HRV? Well, it depends on you. You have your own set point. Okay. And so
that's interesting in of itself, right?
Yes. Yeah. So don't compare it to your spouse, your neighbor, your friend.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what we want to see though, so in that particular client I was talking about with the alcohol, she noticed that she had a certain HRV set point when she was feeling good. Her HRV would be at a certain level and that would be reflected. And then when she was using alcohol, that HRV level would go down. And that to her, that was like meaningful. And like she would feel it too, right? Like she just didn't feel as good. But it was meaningful to her to see that pattern over time. And so then we did an experiment. Well, let's try not using alcohol for a few weeks and let's see. And she saw that number HRV go back up and she felt better. And so this is how you can use it as a coaching tool, whether they're, they want to do more exercise at night, let's see what changes, or they want to change their caffeine use or whatever it may be. You can use that as a marker of trends over time.
Fascinating. So I wanted to, there's so many things I want to ask you, but I want to respect your time as well. Do we want to talk at all, or do we want to save this for next time? Talk a little bit about insomnia versus sleep deprivation.
I think it's worthwhile to just chat about, and I'm happy to come back and do a whole thing on just insomnia if that would be useful. But the main difference between sleep deprivation and insomnia is when a person is sleep deprived, they're sleepy because they're not giving themselves enough sleep opportunity.
Okay.
Right? So I have a patient who, she's got kids, she's trying to build a business on the side, she's working in a corporate job, she's really busy. She's burning the candle at both ends and staying up super late, going to bed at midnight, waking up at 5 a.m., not enough sleep opportunity. Yeah. She's sleep deprived. She's having migraines, like all the things you would expect to see with sleep deprivation. She's sleepy because she's not giving herself enough sleep opportunity. The person with insomnia, they're giving themselves the sleep opportunity. So they're giving themselves that 8 hours in bed, let's say, but they're only sleeping for 4 hours. And the person with insomnia, usually, I'm just speaking generally here, of course, there's going to be exceptions, but they're usually not sleepy during the day. And the reason for that is because they have so much hyperarousal. They've got that nervous system activation that's preventing them from sleeping. And now they're really anxious about their sleep. They're worried about it. They're Googling it. They're doing the sleep effort, trying all the sleeping hacks and sleep aids and all the things. And they give themselves that opportunity. Sometimes they give themselves more opportunity. Let me go to bed at 8 p.m. and hopefully I'll get a few hours of sleep. Now they're spending 10 hours in bed and they're barely sleeping. So that's the difference between the two. So it's important if you're working with somebody to just understand, okay, are we dealing with sleep deprivation? Do we need to prioritize sleep? Have them spend more time in bed? Or are we dealing with insomnia where the treatment is the opposite? It's actually reducing the amount of time in bed.
That's fascinating, honestly. And what really is interesting is what you said about oftentimes the people struggling with insomnia, even though they're not getting much sleep, how they may not be super fatigued.
Yes.
That's really interesting. I can relate. I had a period where I was like, really had bad insomnia. But it was only like a couple, maybe 2 weeks, right? It was episodic. But I was like, I don't know how I am so energetic, right? Like, it was kind of ridiculous and it made no sense. So now I get that.
Yeah. And I like to think about things from like an adaptation mechanism. Like why did our brains evolve to do this?
Yeah.
And if you think about insomnia, it's a safety mechanism. So if you're out, in nature and there's dangers coming at you, like there's predators or whatever, your nervous system is not going to feel safe. And if you slept, you're vulnerable. So our brains have evolved to adapt to develop insomnia if you don't feel safe. Nowadays, in our modern world, we're not worried about tigers coming to eat us, right? But we have all these other stressors, and our nervous system doesn't know the difference between a tiger and an angry email from an unhappy client, right? Like, the nervous system doesn't know the difference. So we have adapted to have this hyper-aroused, wired but tired phenotype, right? And that's a protective thing. So when you're working with your client, what we want to do is help them develop a sense of safety in their life. And that is going to allow for sleep. So that's why, we call our program Effortless Sleep, so that we can allow that sleep to come back effortlessly. And if you are working with clients, then what you can do, like 2 simple tools you can use. One is the Epworth Sleepiness Scale. That's a free screening tool you can download and use in your practice. And your patient who's sleep deprived, they're going to have a higher score on that scale. And your person with insomnia is going to have a lower score on that scale because they have so much activation. So that's just a really simple tool you could try. And the second tool is the Insomnia Severity Index, also a free tool. And you can administer that to your client. It takes 2 minutes, and you can see how much nervous system activation and anxiety they have around their sleep. And it's just a really useful thing. And, in our Effortless Sleep program, if someone has a score on their ISI, their Insomnia Severity Index, more than 8, then they would benefit from something like a more structured program.
Okay. Fascinating. I did want to share your link. Nisha, can you tell us a little bit more about this? I think this is a new program.
Yes. So I have a free insomnia training for clinicians.
Okay.
Whether you're, a physician, you're an NP, you could be an RD, like whatever your background is. a coach, you're welcome to come to this free insomnia training. The link is there, and you'll learn a really useful framework to address insomnia with your clients. And it's very simple. It's a lot of fun. We're doing it live next week, June 16th and 17th.
Okay.
So there's an option for the Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific time or Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. It's the same class. And yeah, so I invite all of you to come and join me there, and we'll have a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Okay, guys. So for those of you that are listening and aren't able to see what's on the screen, the link is members.intrabalance.com/insomnia. So again, members.intrabalance.com/insomnia. And that is a live training specifically for practitioners. So sounds like a really good fit for many of our practitioners and coaches here. So go ahead and by the way, will there be a recording for anyone that can't? Okay. So
there will be a time limited recording. So the recording is going to expire. Let me just get my calendar. So the recording will expire on June 22nd.
Okay.
So if you do plan to watch the recording, just make sure you watch it before it expires.
Which honestly is a really smart idea, just saying. Because we all have intentions of listening to recordings, like all of us, myself included. And then, things come up, we'll get to it. So this definitely is a great strategy to, just get you to do it, right? Something that's important to you, you make time to make it happen. All right. So let's start to wrap up. I would like to get your feedback. Is there a mindset shift that you can recommend that our clinicians, start to work towards as they, to help them be more effective in working with clients and patients struggling with insomnia?
Yes. Okay. So I think the first thing is to make sure you're not engaging in that dance of sleep effort. Okay. So just to ask yourself, and we'll talk about this more on the training next week for anyone who wants to hear more about that, but am I feeding into the sleep effort that this patient is engaging in? So that's the first thing, just to recognize. The second thing I would say is to ask yourself, why is the patient not sleeping? Rather than, I think a lot of times as clinicians, practitioners, we focus on trying to help the patient feel sedated at night, and that's feeding into the sleep effort. So the question to ask is not what tool do we need to try next, but why is the patient not sleeping? And I go into more detail in the free training on how do you even figure that out. And there's a framework that I teach that you can easily go through the steps. But those are the two things. Am I engaging in the dance of sleep effort with this patient? And why is the patient not sleeping?
Okay. I love that. Okay. So let's go ahead and I could talk on and on about this topic. And based on all the people here listening in, I think we've definitely, as they say, struck a chord. So I want to thank you so very much, Nishi, for your willingness to join us. And I do hope that we can do this again. This is such an interesting topic. And it's so, so very important because, we're working with clients and sleep is such a problem for many, many, many of our clients. So I really appreciate your willingness to share your expertise. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.